The crystalline structures of Europa's surface glittered under Jupiter's distant light, casting prismatic shadows across Dr. Sarah Chen's research station. She adjusted her quantum scanner for the 1,000th time, searching for signs of microbial life in the Moon's subsurface ocean. After 6 months alone at Europa Research Station Gamma, she had developed an intimate relationship with every piece of equipment, which made the sudden anomalous reading all the more startling. "That's impossible," Sarah muttered, her breath fogging the inside of her helmet as she leaned closer to the scanner's display. The quantum signatures she was detecting weren't just signs of life, they were patterns. Complex, organized, deliberate patterns. The ice beneath her feet began to glow. Sarah stumbled backward, her magnetic boots keeping her anchored to Europa's surface as the glow intensified. The light seemed to pulse with purpose, forming intricate geometric shapes that shifted and flowed like liquid mathematics. Her quantum scanner's readings went off the charts. "Base, this is Dr. Chen," she called over her comm link, struggling to keep her voice steady. "I'm detecting some unusual phenomena at grid point Echo 7. Request immediate." The ice cracked. Not with the violent force she'd feared, but with precise, deliberate movements. The surface began to reshape itself, crystalline structures rising and falling like a geometric tide. And in the center of it all, something emerged. It was beautiful, a being composed of what appeared to be living crystal, refracting Jupiter's light in impossible ways. Its form shifted constantly, yet maintained a coherent structure that somehow reminded Sarah of a flower opening to the sun. Her training kicked in. First contact protocols had been drilled into every deep space researcher, though no one truly expected to need them. Sarah slowly raised her hands, palms forward, the universal gesture of peaceful intent. The crystalline being responded by emitting a complex pattern of light that made Sarah's quantum scanner chirp excitedly. She glanced at the readings and gasped. The light patterns weren't random. They were organized in a way that suggested language. "Hello," Sarah said softly, knowing her voice wouldn't carry in Europa's thin atmosphere but unable to help herself. To her amazement, the being seemed to react, its crystalline structure shifting to create new patterns of light. Sarah's hands flew to her tablet, recording everything. The patterns seemed to follow mathematical progressions, prime numbers, Fibonacci sequences, the golden ratio. This wasn't just communication, it was sophisticated mathematical discourse. Hours passed as Sarah worked to establish basic communication protocols. The being, which she learned was called a Lumini, was equally fascinated by her. Through mathematical exchanges, she began to understand that the Lumini had been studying humanity from beneath Europa's ice for decades, waiting for the right moment to make contact. As Jupiter set behind Europa's horizon, casting them into relative darkness, Sarah made another stunning discovery. The Lumini didn't just communicate through light, they were connected to each other through quantum entanglement. Each individual was part of a vast, crystalline network that spanned the entire moon. "Base," Sarah transmitted, her voice trembling with excitement. "We need to update first contact protocols. They're not just intelligent, they're beyond anything we imagined, and they want to talk." The response from Base was immediate chaos. Orders to maintain position, demands for data, warnings about contamination protocols. But Sarah barely heard them. She was focused on the Lumini, who had begun creating a new pattern of light. Through their rudimentary communication, Sarah understood they were showing her something important, a warning. The Lumini hadn't revealed themselves purely out of scientific curiosity. There was something coming, something that threatened both their species. As Sarah worked to understand the warning, she couldn't help but smile despite the gravity of the situation. Humanity had dreamed of first contact for centuries, imagining all sorts of scenarios. But no one had predicted that our first alien encounter would be with crystalline beings who communicated through light and quantum entanglement, hidden beneath the ice of Jupiter's moon. The Lumini's light patterns grew more urgent. Sarah focused on decoding their message, knowing that every second counted. Humanity's first alien encounter wasn't just going to be about cultural exchange, it was going to be about survival. And as the ice beneath her feet continued to pulse with living light, Sarah Chen realized she was no longer just a xenolinguist. She had become humanity's first translator for a species that thought in photons and spoke in quantum states. The fate of two civilizations might depend on her ability to bridge the gap between carbon and crystal, between neurons and light. The adventure was just beginning. The bridge between worlds. The next 72 hours at Europa Research Station Gamma were a blur of activity. Sarah's discovery had turned the modest research station into the most important scientific site in human history. Teams of specialists were en route from Earth, but for now, she remained humanity's primary link to the Lumini. Try it again, Sarah instructed her AI assistant, adjusting the quantum interface she'd jerry-rigged from research equipment. The crystalline being before her, whom she'd named Azure for its predominant light spectrum, pulsed with patterns of increasing complexity. The makeshift translation matrix hummed. Sarah had discovered that the Lumini's quantum-based communication followed patterns similar to human language structure, just expressed through entirely different means. It was like finding Shakespeare encoded in DNA. Warning: Azure's patterns translated through her interface. Time short. Darkness between stars grows hungry. Sarah frowned, her fingers flying across her holographic keyboard. The Lumini's metaphorical language was proving challenging to decode. Can you clarify the nature of this darkness? Azure's crystalline form shifted, creating a three-dimensional light display that made Sarah's breath catch. It showed what appeared to be a region of space where stars simply vanished. Not like a black hole, more like they had never existed at all. They consume. Azure's patterns flickered. First light, then matter, then meaning itself. A chill ran down Sarah's spine. She was beginning to understand why the Lumini had chosen this moment to reveal themselves. How long have you been watching them? Time flows differently in Crystal's sight, Azure responded. By your measure, 3 of your years. They approach. Both our peoples stand in their path. Sarah's mind raced. The Lumini had proven to be technological masters of light and quantum mechanics, while humanity excelled at adaptation and innovation. Together, they might stand a chance against this threat if they could bridge the vast gaps between their species quickly enough. Dr. Chen. Station Director Pertel's voice crackled over the comm. The quantum activity from your guest is off the charts. Everything all right? Better than all right, Sarah replied, excitement creeping into her voice. Director, I think I've figured out how to establish a more direct form of communication. The Lumini don't just use quantum entanglement for communication. They use it for understanding. They can share experiences, memories, entire concepts through quantum-linked crystals. That sounds dangerous, Patel said cautiously. It's our best chance, Sarah insisted. The threat they're warning us about, it's bigger than any cultural or technological barriers. We need to understand each other completely and quickly. She turned back to Azure, whose light patterns had shifted to a softer, more inquisitive rhythm. Your kind learns through direct neural interface, Azure observed. We have studied your technology. Perhaps adaptation is possible. Sarah's heart raced. Are you suggesting what I think you are? Azure's form rippled in what Sarah had come to recognize as their equivalent of enthusiasm. Your mind, our crystal, a bridge between carbon and light. The implications were staggering. A direct interface between human consciousness and Lumini quantum networks could revolutionize everything humanity understood about consciousness, communication, and reality itself. It could also be incredibly dangerous. Director, Sarah called over the comm. I'm going to need authorization for an unorthodox experiment. Define unorthodox, Patel replied warily. Sarah watched as Azure began growing a small, perfectly formed crystal from their own substance. How do you feel about letting me connect my brain to a quantum-entangled alien crystal? The silence over the comm lasted several seconds. The coming darkness does not wait for bureaucracy. Azure noted, their patterns taking on an almost amused quality. The teams from Earth are still 48 hours out, Sarah pressed. Director, every moment we delay puts both our species at greater risk. The Lumini have been studying us for decades. They understand the risks better than we do. And if something goes wrong? Patel challenged. Sarah watched the crystal continue to grow, its facets catching Jupiter's light in mesmerizing ways. Then humanity will have lost one scientist while trying to save our entire species. I'd say those are acceptable odds. More silence. Then, you have provisional authorization, Dr. Chen. But for the record, I think this is insane. Noted, Sarah said, unable to keep from smiling. She turned to Azure. All right, let's make history, again. The crystal was complete, small enough to hold in her palm, yet complex enough to contain quantum networks beyond human comprehension. Azure's patterns shifted to a formal, almost ceremonial rhythm. Are you prepared to see through crystal eyes? They asked. Sarah took a deep breath, thinking of all the protocols she was about to violate, all the risks she was about to take. But humanity hadn't gotten to the stars by playing it safe. I'm ready, she said, reaching for the crystal. Show me how to build a bridge between worlds. As her fingers touched the crystal's surface, Sarah Chen prepared to become the first human to experience consciousness through quantum entanglement. Either she was about to revolutionize human-alien relations, or she was about to make a spectacular mistake. Either way, she was about to change history. Shadows in the light. The moment Sarah's fingers made contact with the crystal, reality shattered into a billion fragments of light. Her consciousness expanded like a supernova, connecting with the vast quantum network of the Lumini. It was like experiencing every sunrise simultaneously, like understanding music by becoming the sound waves themselves. Extraordinary, she thought, or perhaps transmitted, the distinction meaningless in this state. Your existence is beautiful. As is yours, Azure's presence resonated through the quantum field. Though different, your thoughts, they move like solar flares. Unpredictable. Dynamic. We had not anticipated the intensity. Through their shared connection, Sarah began to truly understand the Lumini. They weren't just crystalline beings. They were living quantum computers, each individual a node in a vast network of shared consciousness. Their society had no secrets, no lies, no misunderstandings. Every experience was shared, every discovery immediately distributed across their collective. But they weren't a hive mind. Each Lumini maintained their individuality, their unique perspective contributing to the greater whole. It was harmony without uniformity, unity without loss of self. Suddenly, a darkness rippled through the quantum field. Sarah felt Azure's alarm before she saw the images they shared. Vast regions of space where reality itself seemed to unravel. The Void Eaters, Azure explained, the concept flooding Sarah's mind with terrifying clarity. They exist in the spaces between dimensions, consuming reality itself. They have already devoured 12 star systems. Through the quantum link, Sarah witnessed the fall of an ancient Lumini colony. The crystalline structures of their cities darkened one by one as something impossible invaded their dimension. It wasn't just destruction, it was erasure. Complete, absolute, as if that portion of space-time had never existed at all. How do you fight something that unmakes reality? Sarah wondered. We cannot, not alone. Azure's response carried centuries of accumulated knowledge. Our mastery of light and quantum mechanics is useless against beings that exist outside normal space-time. But your species, you think differently. Sarah understood. Through their shared consciousness, she saw how the Lumini perceived humanity. Where they saw chaos in human thought patterns, they also saw creativity. Where they saw inefficiency in human communication, they saw adaptability. Where they saw primitive technology, they saw potential. Your uncertainty, Azure continued, what we once saw as a weakness, may be your greatest strength. The Void Eaters cannot predict chaos. A plan began forming in Sarah's mind, wild and impossible by Lumini standards, but perfectly human. What if we could use your quantum network to detect them, and our unpredictability to disrupt them? The quantum field buzzed with excitement as Sarah's idea spread through the Lumini collective. They began building upon it, their perfect logic combining with human intuition to create something entirely new. But before they could develop the concept further, alarm rippled through the network. Sarah felt it like ice in her veins. The Void Eaters had arrived at the edge of the solar system. Time acceleration unexpected. Azure's patterns turned urgent. They are drawn to quantum activity. Our connection, they sensed it. Sarah's consciousness snapped back to her physical form with dizzying speed. She found herself on her knees in the research station, ears ringing, nose bleeding, but mind racing with possibilities. Director Patel, she called over the comm, her voice hoarse. We need to evacuate Europa immediately. But first, I need access to every quantum computer in the station. Dr. Chen, your vital signs are all over the place, Patel responded. Medical team is en route. There's no time, Sarah interrupted, already pulling up schematics on her tablet. I've seen what's coming. If we don't act now, Earth will never even know what hit it. Through the station's windows, she could see more Lumini emerging from Europa's ice, their crystalline forms pulsing with urgent patterns. They were preparing for battle, not with weapons, but with physics itself. The teens from Earth, Sarah continued, fingers flying across her tablet, tell them to bring every experimental quantum device they have. We're going to attempt something that's either brilliant or suicidal. Those categories aren't mutually exclusive, Patel noted dryly. What exactly are you planning? Sarah looked at Azure, whose form was now projecting complex mathematical equations into the air. We're going to teach an alien hive mind how to think like humans, then use that chaos to punch holes in reality. There was a long pause. That's insane. That's why it might work, Sarah replied, already beginning to modify the station's quantum arrays. The Void Eaters expect logic, order, patterns they can unmake. Instead, we're going to give them humanity. As she worked, Sarah could feel the echo of the quantum connection in her mind. The Lumini were right. Humanity's greatest strength wasn't their technology or their intelligence. It was their ability to embrace chaos, to think the unthinkable, to try the impossible. The Void Eaters were about to learn why you should never underestimate a species that had thrived on unpredictability. Beyond Europa's horizon, space itself began to darken. The human element. The darkness at the edge of the solar system grew like an ink stain on reality. Through Europa Station's quantum sensors, Sarah watched as the Void Eaters began their approach, consuming light and matter in their path. Even Jupiter's mighty bulk seemed dim in their presence. How long? Sarah asked, not looking up from the makeshift quantum interface she was assembling from cannibalized research equipment. 19 hours until they reached Europa's orbit. Azure's light patterns translated through her tablet. Less if they continue accelerating. The research station had become a hive of activity. Every quantum-capable device had been networked together, creating a crude but powerful system that Sarah hoped could interface with the Lumini's vast crystalline network. It wasn't elegant, but elegant wouldn't save them now. Dr. Chen, Director Potel's voice crackled over the comm. The evacuation ships are ready. Last transport leaves in 20 minutes. Sarah kept working, connecting delicate quantum circuitry with steady hands. I'm staying. That wasn't a request. This station wasn't built to be a battlefield. No, Sarah agreed, making a final connection. It was built to push the boundaries of human knowledge. That's exactly what we're going to do. She could almost hear Patel's frustration. The teams from Earth won't get here in time, Sarah interrupted. This is happening now. The Lumini network is our only chance to coordinate a defense, and I'm the only human who's successfully interfaced with it. Through the station's windows, she could see hundreds of Lumini emerging from Europa's ice, their crystalline forms creating a vast geometric pattern across the moon's surface. They were preparing for battle in their own way, establishing a quantum network more complex than anything humanity had ever achieved. The evacuation ships will maintain position just beyond Europa's orbit, Patel said finally. You have 12 hours to prove this insane plan can work. After that, we implement the nuclear option. Sarah's hands stilled on her equipment. You can't be serious. The Void Eaters would just consume the explosion. All you do is give them more energy to work with. Then I suggest you work quickly, Doctor. As the comm went silent, Sarah turned to Azure, ready to make history again. The crystalline being's form shifted in what she now recognized as anticipation. Your species continues to surprise us. Most would flee. Yeah, well, humanity's got a bad habit of running toward danger instead of away from it, Sarah said, connecting the final components of her interface. Especially when we're angry. And these Void Eaters. She gestured to the encroaching darkness. They just threatened our home. The quantum interface hummed to life, its connections spreading out through the station like electronic neurons. Sarah took a deep breath, remembering her first connection with the Lumini network. This would be different. Instead of one human mind connecting to their network, she was attempting to create a bridge between two entirely different forms of consciousness. Begin quantum sync, she commanded the system. Around the station, the Lumini's crystalline pattern began to pulse in harmony with her equipment. Phase match established. Beginning consciousness upload in 3, 2. Reality fractured. This time, Sarah was ready for the expansion of consciousness, but nothing could have prepared her for what came next. The combined quantum network of humanity's technology and Lumini crystalline structures created something entirely new, a hybrid consciousness that fought in both light and electricity, in both logic and chaos. Through this new awareness, Sarah could see the Void Eaters clearly for the first time. They weren't just consuming reality, they were solving it, reducing everything to mathematical certainty, eliminating all possibility and probability until only emptiness remained. They're not destroyers, Sarah realized, the thought echoing through the network. They're perfect logicians. They can't stand the uncertainty of existence. The Lumini collective resonated with her understanding. In their perfect crystalline logic, they had been fighting the Void Eaters the wrong way. You couldn't defeat perfect logic with more logic. But humans were masters of uncertainty. New approach, Sarah broadcast through the network. Don't try to fight them directly. Instead, we're going to give them something they can't solve. She began feeding human concepts into the quantum network: poetry, music, abstract art, quantum mechanics, the double-slit experiment, consciousness itself. The Lumini caught on quickly, using their crystalline network to amplify these ideas, creating a barrier of pure uncertainty between Europa and the approaching Void Eaters. The effect was immediate. The darkness at the edge of their space began to writhe, as if in pain or confusion. The Void Eaters encountered something they couldn't reduce to mathematical certainty: the endless possibilities of human imagination combined with Lumini quantum manipulation. It's working, Sarah transmitted, even as blood began to trickle from her nose from the strain of maintaining the connection. But we need more. Show them everything that makes no sense, everything that defies logic but exists anyway. Through the network, she pushed concepts of love, of sacrifice, of beauty, of all the things that made humanity gloriously, impossibly unpredictable. The Lumini amplified these concepts, turning them into quantum certainties that were simultaneously uncertainties, a paradox that the Void Eaters couldn't process. In the space above Europa, reality began to flicker. Quantum bonds. The battle for reality itself played out in the space above Europa. The Void Eater's perfect darkness clashed against the chaotic quantum barrier of human consciousness and Lumini crystalline networks. It was order versus chaos, certainty versus possibility, endings versus infinite potential. Sarah's mind burned with the strain of maintaining the connection. Blood now flowed freely from her nose, and her vision swam with quantum calculations and impossible geometries. But she couldn't stop. Through the hybrid network, she could feel the Void Eater's confusion turn into something like fear. They've never encountered anything they couldn't solve. Azure's thoughts resonated through the network. Your species, you are an equation with infinite solutions. The quantum barrier pulsed with human concepts, the uncertainty principle, wave-particle duality, the observer effect, all the wonderful contradictions that existed at the heart of reality itself. The Lumini amplified these concepts, turning them into weapons of pure possibility. Status report. Director Purtell's voice cut through Sarah's quantum-enhanced consciousness. It's working, she managed, each word an effort. But they're adapting. They're trying to solve us by brute force. Indeed, the darkness had begun to change its approach. Instead of trying to consume their defensive barrier, it was analyzing it, attempting to reduce the chaos to comprehensible patterns. The Void Eaters were learning. We need something more, Sarah broadcast through the network. Something they can never solve. The answer came from an unexpected source. Deep within Europa's ocean, ancient Lumini archives activated, sharing knowledge they had gathered over millennia of studying humanity. They had discovered something remarkable. Human consciousness itself was a quantum phenomenon, one that defied their most sophisticated attempts at analysis. The ultimate uncertainty, Azure's patterns blazed with revelation, not just your thoughts, but your very awareness. Self-reference that creates infinite recursion. Sarah understood. Human consciousness was a paradox, an observer observing itself, creating an endless loop of awareness that could never be fully resolved. It was exactly what they needed. Everyone, she commanded through the station's comm system, focus on your own awareness. Don't think about anything specific, just be aware of being aware. The remaining station crew, connected through her jerry-rigged quantum interface, followed her instruction. The effect was immediate and stunning. The quantum barrier transformed, becoming not just a wall of chaos, but a recursive loop of consciousness itself. The Void Eaters recoiled. Their perfect logic encountered something that wasn't just uncertain, but fundamentally unsolvable. Human consciousness, amplified through Lumini quantum networks, became a weapon that violated their most basic assumptions about reality. But the victory came at a price. Sarah felt something giving way in her mind as she maintained the connection between human and Lumini consciousness. The hybrid network was becoming unstable, threatening to collapse under its own complexity. Sarah, Azure's patterns turned urgent. Your neural architecture is degrading. Continued connection will cause permanent damage. How long? She gasped, tasting copper in her mouth. Minutes at most, but if the connection fails, the barrier falls. Through the quantum link, Sarah could feel the Void Eaters regrouping, preparing for one final assault. They had encountered uncertainty and survived. Now they would attempt to consume it, to reduce even chaos itself to mathematical certainty. Dr. Chen, Patel's voice was sharp with concern. Your vital signs are critical. Disconnect now. But Sarah had seen something through the quantum network, a possibility so absurd, so perfectly human, that it just might work. The Void Eaters weren't just trying to consume their barrier, they were trying to understand it, and in doing so, they had made themselves vulnerable. Azure, she transmitted, her thoughts growing fuzzy at the edges. Remember how you said humans think like solar flares? The crystalline being's patterns flickered with acknowledgement. What happens if we stop defending and start attacking? Not with logic or chaos, but with pure human imagination. Understanding rippled through the Lumini network. It was tactically unsound, strategically reckless, and completely unexpected. In other words, perfectly human. Sarah gathered every remaining scrap of strength and consciousness. Through the hybrid network, she began to push not defense but creation, the ability to imagine new possibilities, to dream up entire universes, to believe in things that had never existed and make them real through sheer force of will. The Void Eaters, in their attempt to understand and consume chaos, had opened themselves to it. Now that chaos would become their undoing. Everyone, Sarah broadcast one final time, her consciousness beginning to fade, show them what it means to be human. Show them everything we can imagine, everything we can dream, everything we can become. Above Europa, reality itself held its breath. Brightness of the human spirit. The void above Europa erupted with impossible colors as human imagination, amplified through Lumini quantum networks, crashed into the perfect darkness of the Void Eaters. Reality buckled under the assault of pure creative force, dreams, hopes, fears, and possibilities all made manifest through crystalline quantum manipulation. Sarah Chen's consciousness stretched across a hybrid network, her mind a bridge between two species and a weapon against entities that devoured reality itself. Through the quantum link, she could feel the Void Eater's perfect logic shattering under the weight of infinite possibility. There, changing, Azure's patterns pulsed with wonder. Your chaos, it infects them. Indeed, the darkness was transforming. Where once there had been perfect emptiness, now fragments of human dreams took shape. Impossible architectures, new colors that had never existed, mathematical equations that solved for hope. The Void Eaters had tried to consume chaos, and instead were consumed by it. You can't solve everything, Sarah managed through gritted teeth, blood now streaming from her ears as well as her nose. Her vital signs screamed on nearby monitors, but she couldn't stop. Not now. Sometimes you have to embrace the mystery. The Lumini network amplified her fading consciousness, turning her last reserves of strength into a quantum cascade of pure human potential. Through the hybrid connection, she showed the Void Eaters everything humanity could imagine, every story never told, every song never sung, every dream that might someday become reality. Dr. Chen, Patel's voice seemed to come from very far away. Your brain activity is reaching critical levels. You need to disconnect. But Sarah could feel something happening through the quantum link. The Void Eaters weren't just being repelled, they were being transformed. Their perfect logic, confronted with the endless creativity of human consciousness, began to spawn its own uncertainties, its own possibilities. Look, she broadcast weekly through the network. There, dreaming. The darkness above Europa had become something entirely new. Where the Void Eaters had consumed reality by reducing it to mathematical certainty, now they began to create reality by imagining new possibilities. Their perfect emptiness filled with potential. Impossible, Azure's patterns blaze with joy and disbelief. They have learned to imagine. Sarah smiled, tasting blood. Nothing's impossible. That's the whole point. Her consciousness began to fade, the quantum connection threatening to burn out her mind entirely. But through the hybrid network, she felt something else, the Lumini, combining their crystalline precision with their newly gained understanding of human chaos, reached out to stabilize her failing neural patterns. Together, Azure's presence surrounded her fading mind. As you bridge our species, now we bridge your consciousness. The Lumini network linked with her dying brain, their quantum perfection supporting her chaotic human awareness. Not replacing, not consuming, but preserving, maintaining the beautiful uncertainty that made her human while preventing that uncertainty from tearing her apart. Above Europa, the transformed Void Eaters began to retreat, not in defeat, but in something like revelation. Through the quantum network, they transmitted a final message, not in mathematics or logic, but in pure possibility. We understand now. Existence is not a problem to be solved, but a story to be written. Sarah's eyes fluttered open in Europa Station's medical bay 3 days later. Her mind felt different, expanded somehow, but still fundamentally her own. Azure's crystalline form shimmered beside her bed, their patterns gentle with concern. "Did we?" she tried to ask. "We did more than win," Azure's patterns translated. "We taught beings of perfect logic how to dream, and in doing so, we have changed the universe itself." Director Pertol stepped into view, looking both exhausted and amazed. The Void Eaters have withdrawn from every system they occupied, but they're not consuming reality anymore, they're creating it. New forms of space-time, new possibilities that we can barely comprehend. And it's all because you showed them something they had never encountered before. "What's that?" Sarah asked, her voice hoarse. "The human spirit," Azure answered. "The ability to imagine something that has never been, and through that imagination, make it real." Sarah smiled weakly. "So what happens now?" "Now," Patel gestured to a window, where more lumini were emerging from Europa's ice, their crystalline forms refracting Jupiter's light in new and beautiful ways. "Now we have allies who understand quantum mechanics in ways we never dreamed of, and they have allies who can show them new ways to dream. Together, who knows what we might imagine." Beyond the window, Europa's ice glowed with crystalline light, and somewhere in the vast darkness between the stars, beings that once consumed reality now learned to create it. Humanity had not only survived its first major interstellar crisis, it had transformed it through the most human trait of all, the ability to imagine something better. Sarah closed her eyes, feeling the quantum connection that now permanently linked her mind to both human and Lumini consciousness. It wasn't an end, she realized. It was barely even a beginning. It was, appropriately enough, just the start of a whole new story.